Yeah, it's starting.
Welcome, everybody. We'll get started as soon as everybody has entered the meeting.
Sanskriti, shall we start? I'm waiting for someone.
Yep, go ahead.
Okay. Hi everyone, welcome for our today's webinar. As you guys would be knowing, we have our webinar every month as such, the International Webinar Week, and we invite some of the top personalities in the field of education and corporate world, right? So this webinar, the topic is drivers of growth and of professional growth as such, and we have got with us none other than Tom Dougherty, right? Let me introduce him. Introducing Tom Dougherty, right? He's working as an executive in residence at Bryant University currently, and he's professor in both data science as well as MBA as such. If you look into his past background, like he carries with him a rich and a solid industry experience, right, of more than 30 years, wherein he's worked in a senior leadership positions, right, like vice president and all, in multinational firms and consulting firms. To name a few, PwC and AT Kearney, right, are amongst the top ones that he has worked with. And in his last job, he was working as a vice president with Fidelity Investments. For the last 4 years, he's opted to get into academia, teaching, and consulting space, right? And that's how he's working with Bryant University as such. And he's really obliged us to come and deliver this session and share his rich industry experience as well as academic experience in the field of data science, statistics, machine learning, AI, management, and what are the drivers of the growth, right? So we welcome you, Tom, and over to you.
Well, thank you, Anand. That was very nice. Welcome. I'm pleased to be with everybody here. Let me share my presentation and let's get started.
Yeah, sure, Tom.
All right. Well, as I said, welcome, and feel free to introduce yourself in the chat. As I get a chance, I will check the chat. I know we'll have a very diverse audience here, and we will have time for questions afterwards. So let's get going. All right, so I'm here to talk about drivers of growth and the opportunities they present to you for your career. So we're in the fourth industrial revolution here, and your success is going to be dependent on how you fit into the fourth industrial revolution. And just to steal the highlight of the presentation, right, the fourth industrial revolution is largely about data and information technology. And we want to see what your role is in that information revolution. And your success will be dependent upon your ability to make decisions and back them up and communicate them with data. So let's get started here. I want to talk a little bit, let's talk about some macro trends before we get started here. And I think these statistics, these facts probably will not surprise anybody, but modern economic growth has been linked to investment in the digital economy. And there are a number of ways to define the digital economy. But let's just say that the digital economy, by the definition that I would use, is estimated to be about $12 trillion. Right? And this is pre-pandemic. It's certainly grown post-pandemic. So these numbers would tend to be a little bit understated. So it was about 16% or 15.5% of the global economy. And the key fact here is that it is growing prior to the pandemic 2.5 times global GDP over the past 15 years. So I think everybody knows that the digital economy is where things are really growing. I think we can see the investments growing, how well tech stocks are doing, both in terms of growth and valuations and so forth. And it's a regional phenomenon as well. Growth by country is linked to their investments in information, communication, and technology as a percent of GDP, right? And we have here in the United States, we've certainly undergone a revolution in ICT, right? And it's increased productivity, which is going to be very important as we have here in the United States, and I suspect around the world, a labor shortage. So technology hopefully will come to the rescue there. Productivity has really grown quite a bit and will continue to grow as we introduce automation, both physical as well as logical. All right, so again, these are prior to the pandemic, but so we have economic growth has been linked to transformation from manufacturing to services, right? So we know that, for example, China made a big effort to try and create a services economy. Of course, the pandemic hit, right? And then people stopped buying services and they started buying goods. So we had a little bit of a change. And now we have, of course, have inflation in goods because we have tremendous demand. And you'll hear politicians and hear the central bankers saying they expect inflation to be transitory. I don't know whether that's true or not, but the expectation is that people will stop buying goods and will go back to services, and that will reduce some of the bottlenecks in the supply chain once the pandemic is over. So, and they expect that to reduce inflation. That to me is very much an open question, but there is no question that services is where all of the growth was prior to the pandemic. And likely, once the pandemic has passed, that will continue. Whether or not we then start to see inflation in services, I think is very much an open question. Right? And the largest contributor of growth among core ICT services is enterprise software. Right? So companies are really trying to re-engineer, to borrow a very old phrase, the way they do business, and they have to compete in this new fourth industrial revolution, right? And we expect actually a bit of a slowdown in core ICT services, right? And eventually, right, this growth at 250% of GDP has to slow down, has to start mirroring GDP. But we'll see future growth coming from things like artificial intelligence, the Internet of Things, and potentially blockchain, which are expected to grow much, much faster than GDP. Right? In fact, the Internet of Things is very interesting. When I see, all of the things that I see that are linked to the Internet, my daughter's, checks her cat litter box on her phone because it's linked to the Internet to check whether the cat is well or not. And of course, we know cars and so forth. It's creating tremendous amount of timestamp databases that have to be analyzed and stored. I think it's very interesting. AI and IoT are certainly here to stay. Blockchain, we can talk a little bit more. I have a little bit more skepticism about blockchain, but AI is projected to increase global GDP by $15 trillion by 2030, right? And increase China's GDP in particular by 1.4% annually, which is quite a big growth. And it's in fact here in the United States and globally, I think one of the first places that AI is really making an influence is in financial services, right? And that's because financial services companies have high margins, they have money to invest, and they are doing it. It's very, very competitive with the high margins, right? We have, for example, lenders, and the company Upstart, as of a couple of weeks ago, and it's, for all I know, it may be higher, but Upstart is an AI-based lender, one of several AI-based lenders with a valuation of $25 billion as of a couple of weeks ago. So you might imagine that traditional lending is based on credit scores. Credit scores are based on information that is held by the credit bureau. There's a whole host of information, including information from social media, that can be scoured to create better scores, right? And Upstart is one of those companies that is using AI to collect more information, more updated information, and try and make a better prediction of whether or not you'll pay. It's interesting. I think the future of these things, and I'll talk a little bit about some of the risks here, but some of these companies like Upstart have never seen a recession, and we'll see what happens there. We all remember, the subprime crisis and what happened. We're all familiar now with Zillow, right? And their modeling. If you only have a positive history to model, then your modeling is only as good as your data. And we saw Zillow actually running into some trouble with their models predicting home prices. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. But I think the methodology is here to stay, and the way of business is here today. And of course, on the right, well, let's talk a little bit more before we go to the right. So robo-advisors, they've been around for a while, creating custom portfolios and constantly rebalancing portfolios. We have lots of companies that are AI companies that do very specialized things that are getting very high valuations. There's a Switzerland-based company called Yokoi Group, which is an AI company that helps companies manage travel expenses, right? And they recently completed a round of funding that valued the company at over $100 million. So we've seen valuations for AI companies expanding into AI that have just been astronomical. And of course, we can see on the right, financial services company, what they're investing in, right? Digital and mobile experience, people doing trading on their phones, even young kids, unfortunately, doing trading on their phones. What the future of that will be very interesting. I have a nephew who's 12 years old who trades stocks on his phone, and it just, I feel that can't end well. But that's another story. But analytics, in fact, we see at Bryant University, the hot areas that our students are hired into are data analytics / AI and cyber security. So areas, and they're hired into companies like financial services companies, insurance companies, companies that are really making big investments. And of course, people may have heard the phrase data is the new oil. That's a little bit play. It's interesting. I saw on CNBC this morning, someone had an article that said car batteries are the new oil because of the massive investment in electric cars. And we can talk a little bit about that as well later. But data certainly is the new oil. The world's largest and most powerful companies are in the data industry, as opposed to the turn of the 20th century, where they literally were oil companies and they had to be broken up because they were so powerful. And in fact, these large technology companies may need to be broken up as well because they're so powerful. And I'm talking about companies like Microsoft, Apple, Alphabet, Facebook, Amazon. Those 5 companies really dominate the business world. And they're very good at using data. Apple has exploded in valuation because they've changed themselves from a manufacturing company, or at least changed the perception of themselves from a manufacturing company to selling subscription services. All right, so we've got tremendous amount of data that exists. Right? So Forbes magazine estimated that in 2018, there were about 2.5 quintillion bytes of data created every day. Seems like an enormous amount. And now they're saying that the growth is exponential, and that by 2025, 443 quintillion bytes of data will be created every day. And largely this is driven well, by a host of things, but in large part by IoT, the Internet of Things. All right. And success stories in using information are really very, very well known. Right? We talk about them all the time. Amazon's e-commerce revenue, 30% of their e-commerce revenue comes from products that are recommended to you that you didn't necessarily come to Amazon to buy. And of course, 30% of Amazon's e-commerce revenue alone makes them one of the world's largest retailers. So one of the world's largest retailers is selling things that you didn't even know you wanted. Right? And Target, of course, using their credit card and becoming very successful in their use of data generated from their credit card. And of course, this is a little bit older, but Netflix famously offered $1 million prize to anyone who could improve its recommendation engine by 10%. And I often ask my students, why does Netflix really care whether or not their recommendation engine is a little bit better? They don't charge more, collect more money if you watch more, but of course, they know very well how long they need to keep you engaged before you decide that you will not stay a customer of Netflix. Right? And so we have the rise of big data. Right? The growth in data is primarily driven by unstructured data. Right? But even the flood of structured data, and by unstructured data, I mean audio, video, free-form comments, data that doesn't fit nicely into a column. Right? So unstructured data is everywhere. Every time you take a video or a photograph, you're creating unstructured data. When you leave a voicemail for a company or write comments in, you're creating unstructured data. The problem is that many companies, especially larger companies, are struggling with the flood of even structured data. 95% of companies say they're struggling with how to handle unstructured data. I don't know who the 5% are. To me, it's a very challenging problem, right? And more than 97% of companies are investing in big data and AI to assist them in dealing with their data. Companies do understand that in order to be successful, they need to get a handle on their data and they need to leverage value from their data. And if they don't leverage value from their data, they're going to be left behind. And it's a challenging problem to solve. All right. So what does that mean for you? This is to talk about you. Well, data scientists, I think it's almost 10 years ago now that Tom Davenport in a Harvard Business Review article called Data Scientist, the Sexiest Job of the 21st Century. And Indeed, CareerCast, and US News all list data scientists, machine learning engineer, and software engineers as the most in-demand jobs. And I will tell you that at Bryant, our data science graduates do get very good job offers for shockingly good money for people who are undergraduates just graduating. So if you do have those skills, you'll do very well. You could also be a business analyst. Business analysts or business intelligence analysts are in high demand. And those are people that require less technical skills and greater ability to interpret data. Tools like Tableau and Microsoft Power BI are not all that difficult to learn. And if you're a business intelligence analyst, your benefit is that you understand the data and you have a tremendous ability to communicate that data and interpret what it means to senior management. And actually, I will tell you, even our data scientists, but everybody in any position needs to learn how to use data creatively, right, to improve the execution of your department or your company. And that does not mean that you need to be a data scientist or even a business intelligence analyst, but you need to be able to look at data and tell a story using that data, right? And communicate well. Communication skills are critical. Even for our most technical people, I emphasize the ability to communicate. And of course, we have many different departments: marketing, accounting, medicine. Right? Medicine is a big target of AI because the costs are so high. And of course, image recognition technology is getting better all the time. Maybe being a radiologist is not, maybe people are not going to read X-rays in the future. They're going to be read by machines or MRIs or whatever it may be. It's a big target. I'm not a healthcare person, but I see lots of interesting things happening in healthcare. A lot of my time in my career was in supporting marketing teams. And it's interesting. I mean, marketing, of course, it's taken for granted that marketing always goes with the campaign, with the creative that has the best data, that's tested, and that's the best data. It's not that long ago. I can remember, and I hate to reveal my age, but back in the 1980s, marketing people would look at beautiful creative and make the decision based on just the sheer beauty of the creative. Nobody does that anymore. I mean, it's been a total turnaround. We could have creative that looks terrible. If it tests better, they go with it. And nobody even questions that anymore. So if you're going to support marketing, accounting, all of our accountants, right? A lot of accounting has been automated using RPA. So accountants have to be able to interpret data and present it to their clients. And a lot of our accountants take a second major in applied analytics. All right. And companies, you'd be surprised at some of the companies that have really leveraged artificial intelligence and robotic process automation and the combination of the two. Here we have Ryder Trucks optimizing the routes of their trucks. Interesting, not a company that you might think of as being very sophisticated, but they are. AAA, another company and a partner of Bryant University, using artificial intelligence to try and upsell products. Amica Insurance, another partner of Bryant University, very sophisticated, very smart people, have PhDs in data science, lots of applications of data science in insurance. Fidelity Investments, where I worked, big investor, of course, in artificial intelligence. Airlines in general, trying to optimize your experience and optimize the revenue that they get from customers. So it goes across the board to companies that you would expect and companies that you might not necessarily expect, but they will be the winners. All right. And in fact, we're going to see, we'll talk a little bit later about what industries are really holding opportunity for you. So whatever career path you choose, you have to become data savvy, right? And the reason I say this is that many of you, I don't know if you're technical people on here. I suspect we have a mixture of technical people and non-technical people. If you're a technical person and you're comfortable with data, my advice to you is get comfortable with telling a story with data, communicating with data, presenting with data. If you're a non-technical person, same story, right? Get comfortable with data, right? You still have to get comfortable with data, and you still have to use data to support your decision making for your company, right? Businesses will need people who understand data and can use it to communicate and make decisions. All of your decisions need to be reinforced with data. And in fact, I tell my students, sometimes look at the television show Shark Tank, right? And they don't make investments in companies based on great ideas without looking at the data. When they get people up there, I saw one show had a 12-year-old kid on it, and they were pushing the kid for data. So very interesting. And because of that, the profile of senior executives have changed dramatically, right? In the 1980s, the typical CEO was a deal maker, right? It was about cutting costs, right? Merging companies, laying people off, synergy was the big buzzword, right? And now it's very different, right? So from the Carl Icahns of the 1980s to the Mark Zuckerbergs of the modern day, instead of big personalities, right? They're people who are sophisticated data junkies. They're more, in the 1980s, someone to be a CEO of a major company, you really were the face of the company, and these were really large personalities. I mean, people like Ross Perot, who would even run for president and so forth, as opposed to someone like Mark Zuckerberg, who's a little bit more private and a little bit more nerdy. very interesting transition that we've seen, that I've seen certainly in my lifetime, being a little older probably than most of the people on this call. And from sales to production, companies are looking for those that can leverage data to make decisions. Sales managers these days are very, very data-driven people as opposed to relationship-driven people. The profile has changed, but you still need those soft skills. You still need to be able to sell. You still need to be able to present. You still need to be able to communicate. So you need more skills now than you did in the past. All right, so some issues to be dealt with that I would be remiss if I didn't point out, that the low cost of money may be driving overinvestment in things like artificial intelligence, blockchain, etc. And that happened in the year 2000 as well. We had a large overinvestment in new technologies, particularly things like fiber optics. And that's okay. That doesn't mean that the revolution stopped. It just means that some companies didn't quite pan out. And in fact, investment in AI, people are very excited, and investors are very anxious to put money in artificial intelligence, right? So an analysis that was done in 2019, just before the pandemic, of tech startups, right, done by MMC Ventures, found that 40% of purported AI startups showed no evidence of using artificial intelligence in their products. And in fact, some of the examples they cite were companies that were purporting to do either facial recognition or image recognition, which had people checking in the background, right, rather than having it fully done by AI. And that's part of, there's a culture, the fake it till you make it culture, that's very, very prevalent in Silicon Valley here in the United States. It's very interesting. It's somewhat dangerous. I mean, you might ask Elizabeth Holmes about that, but she was, I guess, in fact, that's I suppose what makes judging her so difficult is how many other people have done it and then made it. And of course, she in fact did not make it. But it's a strategy that has been employed by lots of technology companies. Right? But why is this? There's a gold rush. Global investment into AI companies has steadily risen over the past decade, and in fact more than doubled. So calling your startup an AI company can lead to a funding premium of as much as 50% compared to other software companies, which generally get high valuations as well. So people are very, very excited about AI. No doubt that AI is the future, and there's a rush to be the winner, right? Because there's a friend of mine and a neighbor wrote a book one time called Speed is Life. The former CEO of Lycos, who is very, very wealthy and very successful, and attributed his success to first mover advantage. So, and the investment, and he's actually an investor right now. And yeah, people like to be first. AI companies, by the way, are companies that do not invest a lot of capital, right? So they're very attractive to the venture community, and they have big payoffs. All right, so let me check. I've got a question. Someone raised their hand. Q&A section. All right, I'm sorry. Please let me know if you have a question. I don't see anything in the Q&A.
Ekta, hi Tom. So Ekta, you can just write it down your query in the chat section or in the Q&A section, and probably Tom will take up that question.
Yeah, we'll have time at the end for questions. I'm not going to speak for the whole hour. In fact, I'm nearly done with the presentation. We'll have plenty of time for questions.
So you want to continue with the presentation, Tom?
Yeah,
how do you want to take it for?
Why don't we finish? I've got just maybe five more minutes left, and then we'll. But please put that question into the Q&A, and that'll be the first one that we answer.
Right. So Shweta, just put your question in the Q&A section or the chat section, and Tom will pick that up at the end, right? Yeah, Tom,
Yeah,
you can continue.
Yeah, let's put it in the Q&A if you have specific questions, so that I don't miss them.
Okay. Yeah.
All right, so blockchain. This is interesting and somewhat controversial, even among, I will tell you, among the professors at Bryant University. And those that will tout the security, among other benefits, certainly the security benefits of blockchain. But others consider at this point blockchain to be more hype than reality. And I suppose even cryptocurrency may face the same scrutiny. In fact, there are many companies that have started in blockchain. I'm not aware of any that are profitable at this point. I'm not aware of any well-established commercial applications of blockchain other than cryptocurrencies. Walmart, I guess, tried, the blockchain to secure its supply chain, its food supply chain. That didn't work out very well. So I don't know. I'm skeptical. Personally, I'm skeptical of blockchain, but I know some very smart people who are not. So I have to respect that. And maybe we'll have some people that will disagree with me here. And then, of course, we have the risks associated with cloud storage. I was a consultant in the 80s and the 90s, and we went around visiting companies, right? So in the 1980s, the stock market was on fire, and it was really about mergers, right, and cost cutting. And in fact, we're sort of dealing with that here in the United States as we speak, right? The middle of America got gutted in the 1980s as companies cut costs, moved production to lower cost geographies, merged, laid off redundant people, and so forth, and stocks soared on the back of that. And if you look at the movies associated with the 1980s, Wall Street, Working Girl, whatever it may be, that's really what it was about. In the 1990s, it really became about growth. And in fact, the dot-com bubble became a bubble because people were paying almost any price for growth. Right? And one of the things that companies used to develop growth was to build data warehouses. And we went around at PwC, or it was actually Price Waterhouse Consulting at the time, and A.T. Kearney, and building data warehouses. These were very, very large projects, tens of millions of dollars, right? And right now, smaller companies realize they need to be in the data business, and they don't have millions of dollars to build a data warehouse. So they are doing cloud storage, right? And they are doing data lakes, and they are throwing everything in there. And there's a tremendous amount of risk with that. And of course, they do justify it. I mean, there are other reasons to build a data lake rather than a data warehouse, dealing with all the unstructured data and unsiloing and so forth. But I'm also skeptical in many cases of data lakes turning into data swamps, not knowing what's in there, data inaccessible and turning old. So there's certainly a lot of risk there. And then many companies throwing data into their data lake that have no idea how to use that data, no idea how to maximize the value of that data or even extract any value from that data. They're erring on the side of keeping everything. And that makes things very, very difficult, right? The cost of storage is very low. We don't know whether it's valuable, so we throw everything in. All right. So in the aftermath of the dot-com bubble, many companies failed, but growth continued. You may remember, you see on the right, the Pets.com sock puppet. And in fact, there was a toy, a Pets.com sock puppet toy, which I think had more revenue than Pets.com. So many companies failed, but the winners were immensely successful. This was the era in which Amazon, for example, started. So the winners and losers will emerge, and of course, e-commerce has grown dramatically despite these notable failures. And of course, smartphones now are the norm, despite the failure of BlackBerry, which I guess still exists, and Palm, the old Palm Pilot, and so forth. So you never know who really are the winners, but the trends do continue. Right? So the most successful companies and people, right, have been those that have used data and information technology in many cases to transform old traditional businesses. Right? Amazon started selling books. It was a book selling company. Right? Uber, the taxi business. What is a more old and stale business than the taxi business? And of course, education. I'll have to give upGrad and others as well a plug. Need to transform education. I can tell you, working at a university, universities are expensive to run and costly, and there has to be a solution to that. I hate to see our students leave with lots of debt. And of course, Tesla and many others. As I said, I saw the article today that said car batteries are the new oil. This may be an area where there's a little bit of overinvestment, but I was, as part of A.T. Kearney, I was a consultant to General Motors in the 1990s when they were trying to transform themselves in reaction to the Japanese companies. And it was very difficult because it was a very stale culture in the automobile companies, very, very stale. And it was where new ideas went to die and people were not highly motivated. It was really not a good industry at all. And now we have, of course, Tesla, one of the most valuable companies in the world. Rivian right now, despite a lack of revenue, is now the third most valuable company in the world. Even Lucid, who is a company that I hadn't heard of until long ago, they're valued actually more than Ford now. So, who will be the winners? Who will be the losers? I don't know. Electrification and cars. Cars may be the new smartphone at some point. And whether we own a car, there was a time we thought we might not own a car because, we would just jump in an autonomous car. I think the future of the automotive industry is one of the most unsure and actually overinvested areas. But it's overinvested for a reason, because there's a lot of excitement there, right? But there are many other industries that are waiting for a creative business person. Not necessarily, Jeff Bezos is not, it's not a data scientist himself. He's a financial services guy. But they're looking for some person to use data creatively to reinvent the business paradigm. Right? And here right now, the obvious answers are energy, right, and the supply chain. They're huge opportunities for modernization. And here on the right, I say, who will be the winner in the autonomous car revolution? Well, it may not be an engineer, maybe a business person with a great idea. All right, so oil, in a sense, we see the price of oil skyrocketing, and oil, we're reminded that oil is still the old oil, and we do need energy, and we're not ready to move away. We obviously do need to move away from fossil fuels due to climate change, but we're not there yet. Right? So we have an overinvestment in things like AI, but really an underinvestment in the old economy. Right? In things like modernization of energy and pipelines, in the supply chain here in the ports in the United States. And of course, that may be a big contributor to the cause of inflation. We have a misallocation of capital. Right? In fact, it's shocking to see something like Facebook, or Meta now, as they're called. Their capital expenditures for next year are expected to be nearly twice those of ExxonMobil, which is a shocking number. And of course, it's easy to see why. This bull market that we're in started a long time ago, and the NASDAQ is up 5,000% since the fall of 1974. 5 times the growth, by the way, of ExxonMobil, which was at one point the world's largest company. So very interesting. So I see lots of opportunities for people who can use data creatively, regardless of the industry that you're in. You don't need to go to a high-tech company. You don't need to go to an AI company. You can be a user of those technologies and improve your career. Right. So interesting. I think this may be my last slide, and then we'll get to answer questions. Energy expenditures, well, just to beat a dead horse a bit here, but energy expenditures were expected to grow at only 2% before the pandemic. In fact, they fell at the largest pace in history. So interesting, the pandemic, what the fallout and what the economy looks like post-pandemic, I think will be interesting. I think there are some risks to what happens, but we'll see. One of the things I do encourage people who are in data science and technology, not just to rush to technology companies, but to be mindful that we need a more balanced approach to growth. And we need to use these new technologies to revolutionize, in some cases, old line businesses. Right? And there are great opportunities, and I think there are great opportunities for you across a whole host of businesses. All right, so I'm going to stop right here. I see that we have some questions, I think in the chat. All right.
Yeah, so thanks a lot, Tom, for your wonderful session, right? It was quite an insightful session as such. You shared experience, you talked about different industries, you talked about the revolution from 90s till today, you talk about tech and non-tech, right? Thanks for a very wonderful session. I'm very sure our audience today, which have come from different countries, right? Different part of the world. Like we have people are there from Asia, from US, from Europe, from Africa, right? They would have really enjoyed your session, right? They're attending it from at different time zones, different hours in their local time. There are few questions, right? As you rightly mentioned, Tom, in the chat box. So Subhadeep Banerjee is saying that he is just citing an example, right? He's saying that remit services to transfer money is from one place to another. It is a good example of a blockchain implementation, right? Initially, it used to take around 2 to 5 days. Now it is happening in few seconds. Like, so what's your thoughts on that? Like,
well, why does it take 2 to 5 days? It really doesn't. It doesn't take 2 to 5 days, right? I mean, the reason it takes 2 to 5 days is for security concerns, right? And there is no security in the blockchain in transferring money, and and that's why it's largely used, not largely, but there's quite a bit of illegal activity going on in transferring money on the blockchain. And the other thing, the problem with the blockchain and using cryptocurrencies is simply the amount of transactions that can be done, right? So I used to have the exact numbers, but the Visa system can handle hundreds of thousands of transactions a second, while the blockchain can handle hundreds of transactions per second. So I don't know. Someone may figure this out. I'm open-minded, but I remain skeptical.
Okay. So that was a great answer, Tom. Thanks a lot for that. Tom, so just sharing your experience, right? As in you mentioned the drivers of the growth, majorly data science or AI or blockchain, right? So in your past experience in the corporate world, right, did you would definitely be working on some kind of projects which had like data science or AI involvement, right? If you would like to share some of your experience from the past from the corporate world, like
yes. So I think one of the first applications, or maybe most obvious applications, are in sales and marketing, right? So we have salespeople who used to be able to go in and try and sell whatever they want. When you're a salesperson now, you use data to try and predict what people are going to buy, and that's whether you're on the phone, right? So we have one of our partners here that has a next best offer. When they're linked into the CRM system, which is hooked up, a person calls, they're told what to try and sell or upsell that person, even very highly paid salespeople at Fidelity, right? And then of course in financial services, you have looking for fraudulent transactions, looking for money laundering. I mean, you have to do these things. The government is forcing you to do this. So there are lots of applications in the insurance industry. So we have insurance partners, some very good, sophisticated insurance partners that, a lot of insurance, automobile insurance now is done by people taking pictures of an accident and sending them in, and then they do an estimate based on that. Well, okay, they can do an estimate there, but they can also try and tell whether it's a fraudulent transaction based on the picture, right? And even if AI doesn't answer all of those questions, it can actually highlight ones that need to be examined further by a human. So they are being successful in that area. And then we've talked about, the lending area, which I think, we talk about. Lending was really one of the first modern applications of data science, right? Predictive modeling. Your credit score is a result of a predictive model as to whether or not you'll pay back your debt. But now we have so much data available through things like social media, and lending can be so profitable. There's a huge demand for fixed income, right, in the world right now. There's a huge search for yield. That's a lot of this is driven by the financial markets. The interest rates are being held artificially low by central banks. So people are looking to do anything with their money where they can get an extra few basis points of their money. So if someone can tell them that they can more profitably lend to people and get a few more basis points because they're looking at their social media or bringing in more data and their models are better and they can successfully lend and you get a little bit more interest, they're doing it. Again, I'm a bit old school. I'd love to see this. We haven't had we had a recession due to the pandemic. It was the shortest recession in history. What would happen if we had a normal recession? So, as I say, when I first put together this presentation, I face a lot of criticism because I'm somewhat skeptical. It's the old okay boomer type thing, and I think we'll wait another year. I think within a year we'll know whether or not I'm an old curmudgeon or my skepticism is warranted in some of these areas.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks, Tom, for sharing your experience. That was really insightful as such. Tom, generally there is a perception, right? All the fields which you mentioned, whether it is data science or AI, blockchain, right? Generally, it is a perception that only people from tech background, right, from a computer science background, technology background, they are the right people to get into these fields, right? So is it a perception or these are the actual facts as such? Because they feel that coding and everything, it's going to be coding intense as such. Like, what do you suggest to these?
There's a tremendous need, as I say, for people who can communicate with those people who are developing these applications, who are comfortable speaking to them, who understand used and can communicate to them. As I say, some of these people that are very, very successful using data, management people, are not data scientists. Many of the people that, very senior executives at Fidelity are certainly not data scientists. Sophisticated in understanding how it's used and communicating, and understand how it changes the business. Right? That's the key thing, how to use it. There are a lot of data scientists who develop a lot of models and have no idea how to use it. We need people that have those soft skills that can understand data, but you just have to be comfortable with data and how it's used. There's lots of opportunities. By the way, as I say at Bryant, I encourage all of our business college majors to take a second concentration or a minor, at least in business analytics. In fact, even human resources people, right? And human resources people are not comfortable writing code, but we have human resource majors. And I tell our human resource majors, if you don't want to, all you're doing is selecting benefits and managing human resource files and so forth, you are very likely to see your job either automated or outsourced. You need to be comfortable with data and understanding how changes in the organization affect productivity. And also, I will tell you, so I talked to my friends at, they have a huge people analytics group at Wharton, and I talked to my friends at Wharton, and they tell me that even interviewing people is a waste of time. Right? And this is very interesting to me because I believe them, and I do respect them. I'm a person, again, who has, been in business for a long time, and I've always interviewed people and felt I've learned something about them, but they've shown me lots of data that says interviews do not, at least at a certain level, they've convinced me that interviewing doesn't do any good at all, that it's all about the data, and then you can hire based almost entirely on a predictive model. So once again, it's, a sports analytics, right? How many sports coaches never wrote a line of code in their life, but they're now managing their team based on the data, right? And in fact, every large professional sports team now has a data science group in it. And those data science group are talking to coaches. And in fact, even the coach, Bryant University, I mean, we're a small university, we are a Division I sports school. And it's amazing the amount of data that's used. And yeah, the coaches, they don't want to see any code. They're not writing any code. At the same time, if you're comfortable writing code, I do think that learning, you don't have to be a data scientist. You don't have to be doing machine learning or anything, but it's not a bad idea to learn a little bit of coding, right? To take a course in Python, for example. It's not terribly hard, and that way you're not dependent upon people to give you data and to manipulate it for you. You can do it yourself. I think that's not a bad thing to do. But certainly, if you're interested in sales management or so forth, those people are very hard to get to code.
Yeah. So thanks for that, Tom. So I think, Tom, you have pretty much broken the perception, right? So it's not only tech guys who can go for data science, machine learning, as Tom rightly mentioned, right? People from HR background or even sports coaches, right? And people from sales background, they can also work on data science and make insights and work and grow in their own profile, right? Whether you're an HR professional or whether you're a sports coach or whether you're a sales professional, right? So thanks for that, Tom. One lady is asking, Haja is asking whether the recording would be shared with her because the battery was low. Yeah, Haja, I think post the session, if you go on the same link, the recording would be captured. So you can go to the entire session, which is being conducted by Tom, right? So you would not miss that. So maybe after a couple of hours, the recording would be updated on the same link and you can attend that, right? So that's by Haja. Is it possible to send to my email? I joined late because I was having a class. Yeah, so that's what I'm saying, right? LSR is also asking the recording of this session. LSR, you can go again to the same link after a couple of hours and this entire recorded session would be captured. So you can go to the entire presentation that Tom Dougherty has taken you through, right? So you can do that. I'll just check with the internal team if we can share an email also with you for the same, right? So coming back to the questions, right, Tom, one more question is you have been in the industry for the last 30 years, right? So how this data AI space has been transformed for the last 30 years? I understand you mentioned how the drivers of growth have changed in the 90s, in the 2000s, and in the late 2020s as such, but how the data machine learning AI space transformed as such, and what do you think its effect post pandemic, right? If you can just highlight that.
Right. So one of the ways that things have changed most dramatically in the past 30 years is the cycle time for analytics.
Okay.
Right. The access, of course, the greater access to data, the more the recency of data. I was a data scientist, as I said, back in the 1980s, and we would develop a model and it would take a couple of weeks to develop a model and implement it and roll it out. Of course, now everything is run immediately. So the cycle time is greatly reduced. And of course, the applications have expanded as well. Right? People are looking for more and more applications, more and more places to leverage data every department in the company. As I do think that marketing was one of the first departments to really look for applications, right? And a lot of it was based on, I hate to say this, but a lot of it was based on the mail. And when I say mail, I mean paper mail, right? So just a little bit of a history lesson, again, to show my age, but there was a time when, the Sears catalog, for example, right? The Sears catalog was a huge, thick catalog, right? And you would mail it even back in the 1960s. You would mail that out to people, and it would still cost more than $5 to send everybody a catalog, right? So what was the original inspiration behind that? Well, reduce the people that were getting the catalog, and you save $5, every time. So if you could, in fact, mail half, if you, instead of mailing 10 million catalogs, you could mail 5 million catalogs and get roughly the same sales, right? So 5 million times $5, right, is $2.5 million in savings, right? And that's why this all started in marketing, right? And then, of course, as we went to the web and things moved from paper mail to email and web personalization and customization and so forth, right? That's when, as I say, the speed became very, very important, right? You need to react very quickly. You need to be completely customized, right? In the 1990s, the phrase was one-to-one marketing. We're doing one-to-one marketing. It was the move from mass marketing, right, based on one television ad that went to everybody, to one-to-one marketing where everybody saw an individual marketing that was customized to them. So now you have, of course, one example of that is Netflix, right? So you go on to Netflix and you see a recommendation engine specifically for you. This is a show that you would like. Your score on would be very different. Your shows that you might watch be very different than mine. So that's a version of one-to-one marketing, as opposed to something that would have a much longer cycle time. And of course, the obvious application is AI. And I will tell you that a lot of AI. So let me address AI. If you haven't seen the movie 2001: A Space Odyssey, which is an older movie now, actually it's 50 years old now. In fact, I think it's over 50 years old. But it is one of the most brilliant movies, and HAL, and I don't know if you've seen that movie, the AI HAL in there was extremely interesting. It was what people thought in the late 1960s AI would be, and the AI essentially was not only something which was making decisions and running the spacecraft, but actually had human weaknesses and emotions. All right, so we've gone. And that was the original vision of AI, really. And you think of it, it's real artificial intelligence. Well, artificial intelligence now, the definition of that has really loosened, right? And most of what we think of as artificial intelligence is really machine learning, right? It has no, it's simply automating predictive modeling that we've been doing that used to take weeks. We're just doing it instantaneously, and we're validating it, and we're testing it, improving it, collecting more data. It's really simply what we used to do with a very reduced cycle time, and we're communicating it through channels rather than paper mail. We're obviously doing it through electronic channels. So that's the definition of AI. The interesting thing about that movie is that while Hal was a very sophisticated AI, he was stationary, right? One of the things that people didn't realize back then was the great growth in mobility. Right? Mobility is a big deal. In fact, also, if you went through even into like not that long ago, less than 10 years ago, if you went to Disney World in Florida, you would have in the future world, you would see people flying around in jetpacks, right? But their phone was a stationary phone. So the move, as the famous baseball player Yogi Berra said, predictions are very difficult, especially ones about the future, right? So what did we get wrong and what did we get right? Back in the 1960s, it was the space age. We thought we'd be flying around with jetpacks, but nobody envisioned the power that we would have in our telephone. And in fact, this telephone has more computing power in it than the Apollo 11 that landed on the moon, right? And I can walk around with it. So I will tell you that the future is, as Yogi Berra said, the future is very difficult to predict. I have a lecture in my class where I talk about the late 1900s, where they thought the biggest problem in the world was in London, the great manure crisis, right? They thought that the streets, that they would all be buried in 9 feet of manure, horse manure on the streets of London, because nobody predicted the rise of the automobile, right? And so, again, you can talk about, and I apologize, I can talk about this forever, but I have a good friend who's a CEO of an agri-tech company who is an eternal optimist. And, we talk, and he's certainly someone who believes that the global climate crisis is extremely important, the number one crisis facing America today, but he's not terribly worried because he believes that, human ingenuity will find a way to solve this problem, much like, at one point we were worried about being buried in horse manure. Right. Wow. So very, very interesting. I love to have these talks, and I'm sorry we can't, talk more directly. I love to talk to my students and get their perception of this from someone who's in their 20s as opposed to someone who's in my age. But these types of talks are always fascinating.
Yeah, I think we would need one more session for this. Am I audible? Yeah, I think
sure.
think we would need one more session for this, Tom, because there's so much of experience that you can share with these guys, and the huge transformation, right from the catalog days, which you guys used to work in the 1980s, to the Netflix recommendation engine and much more, right?
Yes.
So one more question I've got, right, Tom, and probably this can be the last question because we are running out of time. So these tech guys, right, they're attracted with this glamorous world of this data scientist and machine learning engineer and AI engineer, right? So if you can just share with them what is in store for them, right? If they take this path, like how they can plan their career for the next 15 years or so, like they would be entry-level professional graduates who are passed out, right? You want to become data scientist and machine learning engineer. Like, what would be your guiding words for them? Like,
couple of things that I tell people. First of all, while it is true that you will need to continue your education because it is an evolving field, do not wait. Please go out and get a job right away and start learning. All right, you can continue your education, but one of the things, one of the most common things that I hear from my students, both graduate students and undergrads, and one of the big derailers of people's careers is the imposter syndrome. Right, people feel like they just don't know enough. They don't feel like they're a real data scientist. I can tell you everybody goes through that. I went through, even as I was being wildly successful in my career, there were times I went home and felt like an imposter, like I just don't know enough. And I'm going to be discovered, go out and find a job. There are jobs out there, and start learning about an industry, right? We talk about data scientists. Data scientists are people that know coding, they know mathematics, but they also need to know an industry and the data in that industry. So please don't hesitate, get out there, start working, realize that everybody around you doesn't know everything either, and learn together, learn an industry.
Sure. So that's the word, learn in the industry, get domain knowledge, get industry knowledge, and then simultaneously you can work on becoming a data scientist, machine learning engineer, but you can apply that knowledge in the domain that you're working in, right? So thanks, Tom, for that. I think thanks a lot, Tom, for that. Was really absolutely a wonderful session. As in, thanks for spending a good 1 hour with us. As in, people from different parts of the world would have got insights and learning from you, and that was really helpful. Like, thanks. We would definitely invite you for one more session. Probably we can discuss more in detail, right? I think 60 minutes are very short to cover everything.
Yes. Well, I want to thank everybody for their time attending and listening. And please, everybody, I wish you the best of luck.
Thanks, Tom. So friends, we have the sessions every month, as I said. And someone asked, right, what are the courses at upGrad, right, for this drivers and growth as such. So we have this courses of data science, machine learning, artificial intelligence, blockchain, cloud computing, full stack development, cyber security, right? All these are next generation technology courses as such. And we have tied up with some of the top notch universities, right? Universities like Caltech or Maryland, which are the top universities from US as such. We have tied up with Arizona, University of Arizona. We have tied up with Liverpool John Moore University, Duke, etc. Right? The top-notch universities. You'd be doing the online courses from these universities, and of course, we give international experience, right? So the faculties from these universities would be coming and delivering live sessions, recorded sessions. We would be having industry experts, right? Like Tom, you saw Tom today, right? We would be having industry experts like Tom or senior management people who would be coming and delivering masterclass to you guys, right? It would be a completely international experience, similar to today's session, right? When we have people from Singapore, we have people from Africa, US, Europe, Asia, Middle East, right? Attending today's webinar. Similarly, your batchmates would also be diverse from different countries. So it would be huge peer-to-peer knowledge transfer, huge networking as such across the world. And definitely it would open for you the gates for the global opportunities, right? Global job opportunities within US, within Europe, within Middle East, Africa, Asia, Singapore, Australia, right? So one of my colleagues, Sanskriti, has shared the link of our website. You can go there and go through our web pages, the websites on data science machine learning program. And if you're interested, you can apply to any of those programs, right? I think. So that's it for my side. Thanks a lot once again, Tom, for this wonderful session. And thanks a lot, people, for being such a wonderful audience. We'll meet again next month. We'll have some other industry experts, some other senior management people coming and sharing their experience. Yeah, so Loriana is asking, are these courses for younger students only? What about people who have work experience? So yeah, Loriana, these courses are for working professionals basically. A majority of courses which are in the domain of data science, machine learning, or management, or product management, digital marketing, right? All these courses are for working professionals. Generally, we have people from 5 to around 15 years of experience, but we also look into students, freshers, and also some senior professionals. So I would suggest that you can drop down your queries to admissions@upgrad.com. Sanskriti, if you can just put your email ID, right, and just mention what your profile is. So we'll connect you with a specific counselor who can guide you and exactly know on the basis of your background and your interest, which is exactly is the right course suitable for you, right? So yeah, you can just drop down your query to this email ID, or else you can also visit at upgrad.com and you can just go through different courses and put your details there, your email ID and phone number, and one of our counselors will get back to you, will connect with you, counsel you, and depending upon your background and where do you want to land, right? What do you want to get into? What are your career aspirations? What are your interests? What is your previous background? Accordingly, they'll suggest and guide you different courses which we have, right? I think that's it from my side. Thanks, people. You are really a wonderful audience. Thanks for your valuable time. Thank you.